Hi, Ethan Schoonover here. I had a question from someone about how to do Chromakey Fog of War for a hex crawl, and I came up with a cool idea. I'm going to try to demonstrate it here in real time. I just tested it. It seems to work well. And basically, the idea is that the Dungeon Master gets to see something like this, or the Game Master gets to see this, and you can zoom in and out. I'm in Photoshop right now, of course. And the players see this, and as you explore, you can just one click go through it, and I'm just one click revealing all these different hex grids. I did no prep on this. I didn't, other than like laying over the Fog of War in a hex grid, I didn't like cut things out or anything like that. But this is a cool kind of one-click solution to remove any arbitrary shape. Doesn't have to be hex. Could be squares, could be arbitrary shapes that you've drawn over on the Fog of War map, or on the Fog of War layer. So let me go through this right now. I'm gonna try to demo this. Let's see if I can do it. So first thing I'm going to do is I've got my laptop open in front of me here. I'm just going to undo the Fog of War effect, and I'm going to go over to OBS here and remove these things. Yep, and yep. So I'm not going to go through and I'm not going to show you everything about how to do Fog of War. Actually, no, I am going to show you everything. I'm going to set it up right now, but I'm not going to explain everything. I'm going to link to the original Chromakey Fog of War video below. You can watch that if you want to see everything done step by step. This is going to be very fast, very quick and dirty. And I just want to preface this by saying, yes, this is probably kind of a technique for Photoshop users. I apologize for that in advance. I'm going to go through a lot of stuff that it might seem fussy. It's really not that hard to do. Just a little bit of practice. You can do this in Photoshop. So I've got things set up here so that you can see my computer. I'm going to be using a lot of keyboard shortcuts. I'll shout those out when I do it. You can see OBS or whatever I'm seeing. So for instance, here's my Photoshop view. And finally, this is the player view, which is currently blank. We're going to set that up immediately. So the first thing I need to do is mention that this is a beautiful map from Devin Rue. This is a Greyhawk map, and you can see here on my screen, it looks gorgeous and amazing. So we're going to use this as our demonstration map. Next, I'm going to go over to OBS, and I'm going to capture this window. So the Fog of War effect relies on a plugin called Virtual Cam, and Virtual Cam is a plugin available only on OBS on Windows. So there are ways to do this on Mac. I'm not going to go into those right now. Let's go ahead and go back to OBS, Tools, Virtual Cam. Assume that this is running and pumping out whatever it is in this black window here. So anything in this area is what my players are going to see. I need to go into OBS and add a source, which is a window capture for Photoshop. So we'll name that window capture PS. We'll go and we'll choose Photoshop. Capture method is going to vary depending on your system. You need to test that, and we'll click OK. And so now my players are seeing the same thing that I can see, more or less, inside of that window. So they're seeing this is the OBS output. OK, great. Or not great, because I need to make the Fog of War so they don't see the whole map. So the next thing I'm going to do is create in Photoshop a new layer. And we're not going to do green screen. We are going to do magenta screen, because there's a lot of green. And if I did in this map, and if I used green as a green screen layer, all that green would be transparent to OBS. I don't want that. So we're going to do magenta. I'm going to choose magenta as my foreground color. I've already done that. Please note that it is RGB. So red 255, green 0, blue 255. That is because we are using monitors. We're not doing print simulation. So there's my new layer. We'll just call this a fog layer. And currently then, if I go back and I look at what my players can see, they can see everything I can with this big pink layer. So let's go back to OBS and tell OBS that this layer needs to have a green screen. I right-click on the Photoshop source. In the sources list, I add an effect filter called Chromakey. I'll stick an M on the end of that so that I remember it is magenta. And we will say that it is magenta in the drop-down. And you can see the radical change there. Now my players see this while I see this. Still not great. I can't see the map underneath. So what I'm going to do is on the keyboard, you can do this in the layers palette by choosing opacity drop down and choosing a different percentage. But I'm going to do this using, oops, where's my cursor? There we go. Okay, so I'm going to do this using the keyboard shortcut. And the way that I do that is by pressing the V key on my keyboard to bring up the move key and then hitting 8. Oops, I didn't select the layer. So select the layer in the layers palette, hit 8 on the keyboard, and you can hit 5 for 50%, 8 for 80%, etc. And you can very rapidly change the opacity. I just wanted to emphasize using the keyboard shortcuts because it makes things a lot faster in Photoshop. Okay, so I've got an 80% layer opacity going on. And great, so this is the traditional fog of war effect. If I were to erase this fog of war layer, you can see that what my players see now is this. So I might do one other thing. Let me undo those changes. In OBS, let's go back to OBS right now. I'm gonna add a matte layer underneath this using color source, and we'll call this matte. White is fine, because it's like paper. And so now, as I'm in, my players see this, I see this. As I erase, you can see the effect is for my players that the map is being revealed. Okay, that was the traditional Chromakey fog of war method. We're gonna do it with hex grid now. So I'll go back to Photoshop. Let me undo all that erasure. And I actually went over, I did, on Google, I did a search for hex PDF download, and I found a website that produces these PDFs. This is incompetech.com. So I downloaded a PDF already, a hex grid PDF. I chose black as the grid color, and I'm gonna take that download and I'm gonna drop that right into Photoshop. Now in Photoshop, I can just zoom out here a little bit, and I'm gonna place this, first rotating it, and then placing it kind of over the main body of the landmass, and I'll zoom in. Now normally, I would probably make this in Illustrator, that hex grid, but just wanted to do this quick and dirty, so I downloaded that PDF and placed it. That works fine. So now I've got a hex grid and the fog of war. I am going to hold down the Shift key and then click on both those layers here in my layers palette. And so that has selected both those layers. I then right click on that selection and I'll choose merge layers. So now I've got a single fog of war layer, and that fog of war layer was 80% magenta transparent. Hex grid on top of it, sandwich them together. And we'll see what my players see right now. Not much. Okay, so now if I were to go over here and I were to bring up my, say, my magic wand tool, again, that was W on the keyboard. Magic wand, click on a hex and delete the fog of war layer. Oops, then I'll show you what my players see. They see that revealed. So I can click like this on any given hex, and let me zoom in. And my players see only this. When I delete, then they see whatever's underneath it. Oops, let me delete that again. There we go. Okay, so let me go back here. That's cool, that works, okay? But we're not done. Let me show you the better way to do it. You want one click. So I'm gonna bring up the paint bucket tool, and the paint bucket tool is gonna be with the G key on the keyboard. And then when I click on the paint bucket tool, I'm going to click X on the keyboard to switch the foreground color to the background color, which was white. Or you could just select white. And I'm gonna fill a couple of these with white. Now, I can't see through those at all. They're completely opaque to me, and that's no good. But here's the trick. I then go over to the layers palette, right click on that layer and choose blending options. And I say blend if this layer is from 0 to 254. And you can see as I do that already, let me move this and you can see the effect. As I move the slider from 255 to 254, it then knows, okay, if this is pure white, we're not gonna blend it to the layer below. We're gonna just throw it away. And so now I can just use the paint bucket, and whenever I fill this layer with white, it effectively erases it. So for the players, the effect looks like this. And I can just go through and I can zoom in, and every time I click, then it erases the layer. And again, my view is this, so I see what I'm preparing to erase. So I know I'm preparing to erase over this river here. And that's it. That's Chromakey Fog of War, but arbitrarily applied in this case to a hex grid. Honestly, pretty simple to do. I actually spent more time explaining this than I maybe needed to, but it's not a hard technique, and the results are great, and you can send this out over Zoom to your players, and you can be switching back and forth between, say, a camera view like you see now and the virtual cam output. So shout back with any questions in the comments or on Twitter. I'm at Ethan Schoonover, and I'd be happy to answer and offer tips and advice. Good luck.